Our scripture passage this morning comes from Matthew 9, 10 through 17. Matthew 9, 10 through 17. Then it happened that as Jesus was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax gatherers and collectors and sinners came and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard this, he said, "It is not those who are healthy and who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." And then the disciples of Jesus came to him and asked him, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "The attendants of the bridegroom cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? But the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. But no one puts a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment and worse tear results. Nor do people put new wine in old wineskins, otherwise the wineskin bursts, and the wine pours out, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine into fresh wineskin, and both are preserved." That is the ending of the reading of God's Word. Our family, as I've said on many occasions, we've traveled extensively over the last 40 plus years. It's hard to believe how much we have traveled, because being in sports and being involved in sports and with Angela and all that, we traveled all over the country every weekend virtually, and not every weekend, but we pretty much two weekends out of the month, sometimes three, we'd be back at church on Sunday. But we'd leave on Friday and be back on Sunday morning. But that went on for years, 40 plus actually. And a lot of those places we would return to occasionally. We would go back and view and see these places that we had been, and they had changed. I mean, drastically changed. I left here in the 60s. Pretty much around 67, I left Mount Vernon. And I did not really come back till, I came back to Dublin. We came back to Dublin in the latter part of the 70s. And there was drastic change around this place. I tell you, the police station was across from the theater. But that's gone. Now it's down. It's in the other buildings there in downtown. Molly and Bud and Molly's Cafe. They had the best hot hamburgers in the world, and you could go in there and get that, and then go to the movie. The movie's gone. Rackley's department store is gone. The soda fountain down at Mount Vernon Drugs is gone. The courthouse has changed. I mean, they're no longer is it a white top, it's a black top. But the greatest change, and I've said this to you before, the greatest change that occurred here in Mount Vernon was when Judy's left. How many of you ever went to Judy's? I want to tell you something. That was the best place you could go in Mount Vernon. I mean, they had the best pinball machines and the best hamburgers, and they had great hamburgers, and college students were in there. She had a gold mine there, it looked like to me. It was just a wonderful place to go. Now we have Friendly Gus, which I'm glad we have Friendly Gus, but that's not the point. But I miss Judy's. Thomas Wolfe, I'm saying some things today that I've said before, but I think they're appropriate. Thomas Wolfe, as you recall, grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, and he went to college at University of North Carolina. Best I recall, and he, after finishing college, he moved up to New York, and he taught English at the heart of Greenwich Village. When he died in 1938, he was 38, and he had written a number of novels during that time. But one of the novels he wrote was about a young man who left town and went away, and he came back, and everything had changed. And I mean, everything. The old hotel that was the mountain rambling hotel with all the rocket chairs and all that around it, it had gone. Everything had changed. The book describes life. And because of that book, we have that saying, you can't go home again. It's this year. We can't go back to 2015. There's no way on this first Sunday. Some of us had such a great year, some of us had a poor year, but we don't want to go back and turn back the clock. We cannot do that. That's not possible. In Jesus' day, religious people were always labeling people like we do. We label people. We call that's the tax collector. We don't even call him by name. We just say, yeah, so and so. He's the tax collector, or that's one of our commissioners, or in Jesus' day, that's a tax collector, that's a Pharisee, or that's a Sadducee. Or you don't want to be associated with that person because he's a sinner, or assumed sinner at least. Except Jesus did not go along with that. And it got him in a ton of trouble because he associated with people who were tax collectors. They were sinners. They were the unsavory types of the world at that time. Well, they were not. The religious leaders, they were not unsavory. They thought they were doing right. They were passionately for certain religious beliefs and things, and people were at that time. So that's why this passage is so important. Jesus talks about you can't take new wine and put it in old wineskin. Because if you do, the new wineskin will burst. My sister-in-law, she left 2 bottles of sparkling they were going to have for the night for New Year's Eve. She left it in the freezer, and it blew up in her freezer. That's kind of like what we're talking about here. It will blow up the old wineskin. Years ago, tires were fixed most often by patches. And you would see people that had patched the same tire so many times it looked like they're brand new tires because they had so much new monkey rubber on them. You remember the monkeys? I guess they're still out, but they would scrub them down, put a patch on. I've seen tires with the tubes with so many patches on them that it really looked like a new tire. Actually, the kids at school. It looked like they wore new pants. Sometimes they had so many patches on. They had patches on the butt. They had patches on the knees. They had patches. All of them nowadays, they'd be in style. They wouldn't put patches on. They just wear them with the hose and buy them with the hose. That amazes me. we would never do that. In Jesus' day, they didn't put wine in bottles per se. I'm sure there were some type bottles, but most often they put wine in the wine skins, or into skins, and it was not uncommon for these to break and burst open, as I said. Now, I don't know a lot about. I know a good deal about patching clothes, shoes, even shoes. I don't want people wearing shoes that were patched. I know I've worn enough pasteboard out in the bottom of my shoes. With that big hole, I just put pasteboard in there and keep wearing them and go for a long, long time. I know a lot about that. I don't know very much about patching wineskin or using wineskins. And I'll tell you the truth, I did not know very much about wine, period, growing up. Because if you even spoke the word in some way in areas where I lived, in Hickston and Kibbe and everywhere else around here, if you even spoke the word, you were a bootlegger. And you had to be careful where you were even mentioning the word. It just wasn't appropriate to say wine, or even talk about wine, or even say it's wine. I like the taste of wine. No, you might as well put yourself in hell immediately. And if you were to say we need to use real wine for the communion, that just would not have worked. So I knew very little about wine, and I still do. Don't know a lot about it. But the people in Jesus, when Jesus talked about, when he talked about wineskins, he was talking about stretching the mind. Stretching the mind. Stretching grace. Stretching what he had to bring and what he brought would change the world. It could not be put into what was already here. It had to be brand new. It needed to stretch. Our minds need to stretch. I said this a couple of weeks ago about, Copernicus, in the universe. The sun, the earth goes around the sun, not the sun around the earth. That was a huge problem. People, their minds could not stretch around that. James Simpson, when he came up with the anesthetic qualities of chloroform, especially for childbirth, people could not stand that. They couldn't handle it. And then when Jonas Hanway came out with the umbrella, people could not handle it. They threw things at him. They threw things at him because he had an umbrella to keep the rain off of him. People have a hard time adjusting, expanding in our world. Spiritually, you can't go on. You can't turn back the clock. You just can't. You got to just. That's why when Christ comes in our eyes, it's like we've got to change this everything, or we will burst. If you are, if you're not careful, you'll put with this stretching, with this ability to stretch. You will listen to. You will just take in everything that comes along, and you'll never grow. Once a person has believes that that God is liberating, that God is somehow that He's not just one way. He's got room to expand. Once that person realizes that, he can never go back to where he was. I don't care how hard you try, you can't go back, because when God when Jesus came, He brought something that expanded people. What we have today is that people say, well, no, it's like this. You can't believe anything different. You've got to have the right doctrine, which is not a problem. But if you go away from that doctrine, what Jesus said, look after the poor. Doctrine is not as important, and so, a lot of doctrines are not as that important. as looking after the poor. But there are people who believe that, no, you got to keep, it's all the doctrine. You got to keep this doctrine. You can't change. You can't expand. You can't be anything but like this. I really, once you are able to think for yourself, once you are able to think for yourself, the world changes. Your faith changes, not to something bad. You just enjoy to be able to research and to look at things differently, and without being criticized. I can look at this, I can say this, and we can talk about this without somebody saying you are going to hell if you believe that. Once you've experienced and you like it, going into a church where there's good music, there's not pounding on the pulpit, there's not shouting, there's not running up and down the aisle. Once you've experienced that, it's hard to go back, to leave, to going back to. I like you're saying, I want to hear the drums, the guitars, and all that, which are good. But once you've experienced whichever way it is, what you receive, it's hard to go back again. It's hard for me to go back to 15-minute invitations. Singing the same song over and over and over again, 15 times, 15 different ways to get people to manipulate them into somehow accepting Christ. It just used to bother me so badly. So there is in the New Yorker magazine, and I'm not going much further, there was a cartoon one time that said, and I've said this one to you before, the cartoon said there was an elevator, and the people get on the elevator, and he starts talking about the upper quality things, and then he goes down to the silverware, and then to the furs, and then he goes down to the cotton things, and right on down to the floor. He's calling out each floor. And when he gets down there, he says, at street level, there's greed, there's frustration, there's lust, and so on. This is at street level. And I want to tell you, I talk here every Sunday about street level. I talk about the fear, the greed, the frustration, the divorce, the anger, the unemployment, the cancer, the anxiety, the aging. But I try to mix in a gracious amount of prosperity and hopefulness and fulfillment. I remind you that that it's among this mixed bag that we live. When Moses carried the children of Israel into the wilderness, it wasn't long before they were saying, we want to go back. But you can't go back. You can't go back to Israel. It would have never been the same. They couldn't go back. And Moses says, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work out for you this day. Don't run. Don't go back. You can't go back. You can't go home again. I don't care. That's why it's so hard to go back to your mother. You like to go back to Mama's and Dad's, but you like to go back home. You can't set the clock back. You can't undo what you've done. You can't become again what you once were. Once the finger starts moving, once the finger starts writing, and it moves on, so do we. To a new day, to a new year, to new possibilities. God will grant us wisdom and courage for the living of these days. Not the past, today. So this year, every single day, let's depend upon Him. Let's soak up and expand as much as we can, because God's putting new stuff in us, new ways, new ideas, new ways of looking at things. The doors are open today for you to expand. We're going to sing the invitation. What is your need today? How do you need to expand?